All right, next up. Where did all this law come from? Well, believe it or not, the roots of our legal system actually come from Europe, more specifically England. Okay, there's this thing called common law, and it's English custom recognized by courts as binding. Okay, this is also called judge-made law, common law, case law, etc., etc., etc. Now, where did this come from? All right, a couple hundred years ago, the king in England was the individual that made decisions. So if you had a problem, you went before the king and you asked him to rule on that particular matter. And over time, this body of law grew and grew and grew and grew. All right? That's common law. Second is equity. All right? This is a justice system based on fairness, and it provides relief other than money damage. Well, you would think that money can fix everything. Not necessarily. Look at this. Restraining orders and injunctions. A restraining order is a court's temporary order forbidding an action, and an injunction is a court's permanent order forbidding an action. Now, let's go back to high school. Ladies, you remember that boy that was bothering you in high school? The one that was, sitting in his car outside your front door, calling you all the time, not leaving you alone. You know what I'm talking about. Now, would you rather have $100 and the boy able to keep on bugging you, or do you want the boy to leave you alone? Yeah, you want the boy to leave you alone. That's equity. All right? It's something other than money damages. Now, where did law come from? Okay? We talked about common law. Okay? Judicial decisions. Right? Remember the king? He was making law, deciding issues. Well, guess what? Whenever he decided those issues, someone wrote it down. Because no one can remember what they did a year, 2 years, 3 years ago. So the king, whenever he would make a ruling, someone would write it down. Okay? And this is what we call setting a precedent. It's a court decision that determines the decision in a subsequent similar case. So if the king decided a certain issue and 2 weeks later someone else came before the king with a similar problem, the king would use the decision he made earlier to help him in making the new decision. Okay? Now, under the doctrine of stare decisis, this is a principle that a court decision controls the decision in a similar future case. No one is going to overturn old law unless they have a darn good reason to do it. All right? So the king would look at precedent, prior decisions, and because the doctrine of stare decisis, would decide similar issues in a similar way later on in time. Okay? In addition, other sources of law, constitutions. The United States has a constitution. It's known as the supreme law of the land. It's a document that contains fundamental principles of a government. Okay? The U.S. Constitution sets up the government. That's what it does. Now, the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments, gives us our individual rights. Okay? So, that's two sources. The third source is this thing called a statute. It's a law enacted by legislative bodies. Okay? Black letter law. Laws that are written down. Okay? Laws that tell us what speeding is, that tell us, exactly what murder is, exactly what burglary and rape, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Those are statutes. An ordinance is a law enacted by a city. Okay? Now, the final one is this thing called an administrative agency order. This is a governmental board or commission with authority to regulate matters or implement laws. Anybody ever heard of the IRS? All right? They're an administrative agency. Right? They have authority to make law in terms of taxes. Okay? Now, so we have what? 4 different sources of law: judicial decisions, constitutions, statutes, and administrative agency orders.